I think that primarily it takes a lot of planning. Um, even though I had been talking with the synagogue leadership and membership for a while about it, it still felt pretty stressful to begin that process of bringing students in and working with them. Um, so I think use the resources that your community partner has. Don't assume that what you've got is all you can use, right? So we used the rabbi's knowledge. We used a lot of the stuff that they've already collected for sort of archiving, although that just sort of sat in a corner, right? We used a lot of that material. The other thing is I was very, very conscientious to ask what the temple wanted, because what I wanted to look at was not what the temple membership had hoped to come from it. And so when we were building it, I had to sort of put aside my own desires or find a way to embed what I needed in really focusing on what they wanted, which was this people's history essentially of the temple. Um, and then think about reciprocity, because we were using a lot of their time. I was bringing students into the synagogue a few times over the course of the semester, which meant we were also taking up space in the temple, right? And taking up time for our membership or the membership there. So we were really conscientious about what we could do to give back. So one of the things that I set up with the temple was I lead a series of educational workshops for them that they asked for, that they've decided this is the topic we want to know about. And so I will create a little workshop on it as sort of like a exchange, right? They gave me their time and attention. Now I'm going to give them something that meets their needs. So that was part of it. And then the exhibit that is coming out of it is really based not on what I had wanted initially to put together, but what the temple membership really wanted to see happen with this information and these stories. So really, it takes a lot of prep. You have to engage in thinking about what you can offer to your partner and not just what you need from them. And sometimes that means you have to sort of shift around what it is you had hoped for in order to meet the goals that are shared. For me, it was real powerful to watch for me, the unexpected part of the connections that they were making, which was that there was obviously more buy-in on both the temple membership part and the student part, but the fact that the students were able to come in and offer something to this group made them feel valued, which in terms of a learning experience is particularly useful and important for students to become engaged and then to want to continue. So I think had they not made such uh, the temple members not made such a strong impression on the students and vice versa, there wouldn't have been nearly as much of a forward progress, right, on the project. I think that because the project wasn't just learn these oral history skills, it was also uh, here's why we want to learn them, here's the project itself, and what kind of questions we want, and being able to work with students to develop that, right? Like what I wanted to learn was not what the students necessarily wanted to learn, which is not what the membership of the temple wanted to share. And so they got to see what that negotiation looks like, and they got to like incorporate their own desires into the questions. A lot of the questions that they asked about, say, the Palestinian Israeli conflict, that came from the students' questions, not from mine, and certainly not from the temple, who would like to pretend there's no conflict, right? And so so being able to like change the shape was really powerful to them in terms of the data. And the temple itself really loved having the students participate in their various programs. So they loved having them come to service, because they don't often have guests, and they certainly don't often have young guests. And so they loved having younger people there. Um, they, and especially the rabbi, because of the makeup of the class, the demographics of the students in the class, they sort of had to push themselves to learn a lot about gender and pronouns and various sort of identities that they themselves hadn't been taught about. And they did it. They were really invested in learning how to create a space that felt safe and comfortable for my students, which was not something I expected them to do, because we were there to like do something with them, not expecting them to give back. And that has been a long-term change in terms of the dynamic of the synagogue. They are very committed now to like, especially around issues of queerness, creating a safe space, which has been really interesting. Because I'm sort of an insider outsider, right? I'm there as a member, but I'm also there as this researcher. And so I'm seeing both sides of it. And that has been powerful. And then I think it just gives students A, ownership, and B, sort of a level of more connectedness to their community. None of these students, except for Joel, lived in Muskegon. So none of them really had any connection to the town. But they were able to create these connections, and it's powerful. They keep getting drawn back to it. And I especially think that the people they collected data from, so the members of the temple, being able to sit down one-on-one with a younger person in this case, and share their life story was really powerful. They hadn't been asked these kinds of questions before. We had a few people who were interviewed who I sort of expected to be uncomfortable and short and curt. And I tried to be really conscientious about who I paired them with in terms of which student would be doing their interview. And it was remarkable. They would open up to these young people and then send me messages afterwards that were like, oh my God, I totally loved talking to the student. She was so great. And I hadn't thought about these things. And they talked about pretty heavy things, death and loss and grief. And so I think that seeing the connections that students made with the community was also really powerful. And for a lot of traditional age students, there's not a lot of connections, especially in the project with elderly people, right? They don't have a lot of that and they want it. And so did the members. They wanted that connection. And I don't think they expected to have that happen. And so that was kind of neat to watch too. I think that it is something that takes a lot of setup, and you have to be really conscientious about what it is that you are offering and what it is you are taking, and making sure there's a balance with your community partner. I've set this up as a formal community partnership, but there are other things I've done in other parts of my job in terms of classes where I'm not comfortable officially calling it that yet because I don't feel like we're doing enough for those community partners, right? Like I don't feel like there's enough reciprocity. So if you're setting something up like this where you're going in and you're taking their stories, you need to be able to give them back something. And if you can't do that, then you need to rethink how you're going to make this connection or what you're going to do with this organization. Uh, I I hate the idea that our institution might just poach stories and then not give back. And so sitting with your community partner, your potential community partner, and figuring out what they want or need and what you want or need and where the in between is. And then also what you can give them, whether it's directly related to this information that you're getting or if it's something different. Like I have to go in and teach them about gender identity every once in a while at Temple, right? And so I think you really have to be conscious about that reciprocity and you have to set it up. And then I created a formal, I have a formal sort of form that I use that I get the community partner to sign and I sign that states, this is what we're going to do for you. This is what we're hoping to get from you. And this is the dates, right? Like it's in parameters that are pretty laid out. And so I try to follow that pretty strictly, but it takes a lot of work to set it up. But once it's set up and once it's going, it can be really powerful and impactful for students and for the community if it's done in a way where people feel like they are actually getting something out of it on both sides.